I'm really looking forward to a rich discussion with the group, but maybe let me first take a little bit of a step back and talk about our Circularity Gap Reporting Initiative. Our first Circularity Gap report was launched in 2018, and the purpose there was really to shine a light on the data that highlights the challenges of our linear economy, but also to move the thinking on global circularity in the direction towards better measurement, so as to be able to set targets uniformly and track progress consistently year on year. In 2018, with our first report, we showed that the globe is only 9.1% circular. 2 years later, we're at 8.6. And today we've also surpassed 100 billion tons of material throughput for the first time in human history. This is not a trend that we're very happy about, especially when you consider that as of 2015, we've now transgressed 4 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. These are all very much resource management issues at their core. And if you understand that we live on a finite planet, it becomes very clear that circular economy is not only a desirable state to achieve, but also a necessary one to achieve. With our reports, we're committed to updating the circularity gap metric and explore prescriptive scenarios to explore how to get there. On the next slide, I will talk a little bit about the urgency of climate change and how that's connected to circular economy. Obviously, the issue of climate change is at an all-time high, and the need for international cooperation and effective action on climate change has never been more critical. According to the UN emissions gap report in 2019, we need to reduce emissions by about 7.6% every year up until 2030 to keep within 1.5 degrees. As time ticks by, however, our window of opportunity shrinks, and this rate will only have to increase. This year is also a special one in that it marks the update of what we call nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. This is the national commitments that every country puts forward to achieve the climate targets. This is really a great opportunity to expand the existing commitments. However, the vast majority of NDCs that we see today are comprised mostly of boosting renewable energy capacity and also boosting energy efficiency. And sadly, that's just not enough to close the emissions gap down to 1.5 degrees. We see the growing need to communicate clearly about the role that a circular economy can play in mitigating many of these environmental issues like climate change. For example, we know that about between 2/3 and 3/4 of global emissions are associated with the handling of materials. Various circular economy approaches are well known and widespread. So looking at how we can cycle materials, slow them, regenerate them, or narrow them. There's a huge body of evidence there. And estimates also show that emissions from heavy industry can be reduced by about half by using these strategies. On the next slide, please. There are some bigger questions, however, that still really remain for us. So how do we continue to provide for societal needs for a growing population while also aggressively reducing emissions? What are the key strategies and transition pathways for growing and building economies? And also looking at ourselves in Western countries, how do we dramatically cut our impact with high consumption? The specific role for circular economy in closing the emissions gap is the topic of our 4th CGR Global Report, which will be announced and launched in January 2021. So definitely stay tuned to that. For obvious reasons, we want to hold off on communicating some of our key findings and the specific details from that report. However, we can absolutely confirm that the circular economy has a very big role to play indeed, and must be an important part of our global priorities to meet the climate targets, especially to achieve 1.5 degrees. What we do want to talk about today, however, is the important role and the decision power that nation states have in closing both the emissions and the circularity gap. I mentioned just a few minutes ago that the NDCs, as currently defined, are far too narrow and also too shallow to bring us back within a 1.5 degree scenario. And the opportunity to expand them this year through circular economy approaches is very urgent. So how do we bridge these agendas together, the circular economy and the emissions agenda? And how do we really achieve and unleash massive synergies between them? As we've published our global circularity gap reports, a big question that we often get from political and business leaders is, what is my role in this global picture? What are the tangible actions that I should lead on? And what can my nation do specifically? To begin to answer this, we've been working over the past couple of years with the nations of Austria, the Netherlands, Norway, and now uniquely the province of Quebec in Canada. And what we do there is really conduct nationally specific circularity gap analyses. Focusing at the national level, we're able to generate country-specific circularity gap metrics, map the unique resource metabolism of each country's economy, and better target the kinds of strategies that nations can employ. If I can just take a minute on the next slide, I'll go through a little bit of what that looks like. So the first step of measuring anything is really mapping the nation's economy to size the current circularity gap. And this is very similar to the approach that we take at the global scale. And I think what you can see here is quite a unique picture, what we call an X-ray of each country's economy. And you can really see how different resources flow through the economy. This is a much more intuitive picture, and looking left to right, we can see the extraction and processing of raw materials. So the colors here indicate non-metallic minerals, metallic ores, fossil resources, and biomass. Moving along, we see how the production of components and products begin to take shape, and that's sort of the messy spaghetti stuff in the middle. We're also able to see finally how these final goods and services are delivered to satisfy the 7 societal needs. So housing, nutrition, mobility, healthcare, communication, and consumables and services. What's important here is that on a national level, we're taking a consumption-based approach. So what this means is that we're only including those resources in our measurement of circularity that feed into the national consumption of goods. We would therefore exclude the footprint of materials and products that are exported. The idea behind this actually is that we can deliver a metric that will be impacted by the changes in consumption and behavior on the ground within that nation, and not really depend so much on the changes that would need to happen abroad. We also visualize how these resources and products flow at their end of life. So obviously fossil fuels and energy generated through mobility are emitted to the air. There's also another fraction of materials that are dispersed as dust or through erosion and use. The majority of materials, however, are added to stock or end up as waste. So if we look at this material flow analysis specifically, which happens to be the national economy of Norway, what we can see at the very bottom there is that only about 5 gigatons are recycled and fed back into the economy as raw materials. So doing the math, 5 gigatons out of a total input of 234 gigatons brings us to about 2.4% circular, which gives us the basis for our metric. On the next slide, I'll also talk about the second part, which is in many ways the most exciting part. So sizing the gap is really only half the story. I think the question on everybody's mind is really, how do we bridge that gap? How do we move forward? And how do we address key environmental and social impacts? What we do is start by using our what we call the Disruptive framework. And that's really a basis for assessing the most powerful strategies that can be applied for each nation's unique context. This really gives us an idea of kind of, where the unique solution spaces are, and also where we can begin to model maybe tailored scenarios that really reflect each country's unique context. To give you an idea of what we would mean about that, you can see in the middle of the slide that I have a list of interventions that formed a part of the scenarios in our previous CGR nation reports. So although the emissions reduction potential wasn't explicitly quantified here in these efforts, I can assure you that these are very powerful actions that could be included now under many nations NDCs, and could actually build on a lot of the existing commitments.
1 minute, please, Matthew.
Sure. So reducing the buildup of new construction stock and actually promoting the use of recycled materials for construction is something that we've looked at for the Netherlands, Norway, and Austria. Huge impacts here in terms of bridging the circularity gap, but also when you look at the implication of building a sort of fully fledged secondary marketplace for building materials, you can imagine the impact that it would have on jobs and also certain sectors like IT to facilitate that. Also moving out to more local circular models of agriculture and animal farming. That's something that we uniquely looked at for the Netherlands and Norway. Again, massive impacts for the ecological footprint, which is especially important from the climate change perspective, but also reducing the material footprint by about 12 million tons in the Netherlands specifically. This really goes hand in hand with food waste reduction strategies, and again, exploring synergies where we can look at bio-based fuel, bio-based packaging, and other forms of farming, such as mycelium for mushroom packaging. Again, massive impacts for reducing the material footprint, but also quite a promising picture for employment and emissions reduction. I think the only last thing that I would touch on here is looking at moving towards a more circular system for goods and strengthening the repair economy. This is actually something that we investigated uniquely for the Netherlands. And there's a whole bunch of actions here, and actually a lot of collaboration between both the sort of repair sectors, but also the product manufacturing and design sectors. We found that there are many benefits, including an increase in the number of local jobs, especially, and also in closing the entire circularity gap in the Netherlands by about 6%. So quite powerful interventions. And I know I'm running on just a few seconds of time, but maybe just to wrap up, I think our work really shows that each country is different and can play a unique role in achieving global circularity. The strategies that I touched on are not only powerful, but also within reach for nations. I think we can all imagine what these would look like and the steps toward them. And I think finally, beyond circularity, these kinds of strategies have a meaningful contribution to environmental and social impacts like emissions and jobs. So many of these interventions are not represented in the NDCs. I'm certainly happy to talk about them more in the discussion, but I think it's really a massive opportunity that we're missing, and I'm very eager to promote our work on the emissions and circularity gap in January 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for setting the scene. Next slide, please. Do not forget to ask questions to Matthew using the chat function. I can see that it's already quite lively there. Do keep up the pace. All questions will be answered. So we will now, with the next slide, please, have three testimonials coming from Norway, from Quebec, and Australia. And that corresponds with a finalized circularity gap report, one in process, and one country which desires a circularity gap report. So you will hear to them, they have each 5 minutes of speech, and we ask them, why did you start a circularity gap report? Where do you come from? Why was there a need? How did you set it up? What did you encounter? What did it deliver? So let's sit back and let's listen to the first testimonial coming from Alexander Christiansen, and he is a project manager at our dear friends from Circular Norway. Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and hello everybody. I'm very pleased to address you all from Oslo today to highlight some of our experiences with the Norwegian Circularity Gap Report. And today the Norwegian economy is 2.4% circular. That means only 2.4% of the resources we use every year to satisfy our societal needs make it back to the economy again. Or on the flip side, we are more than 97% linear. However, this is really also an opportunity for Norway. And for Norway to tap into this huge opportunity, we need leadership. And we need leadership because we need to address some painful questions related to the Norwegian economy. The fact that we have one of the highest global rate of consumption. We have a long tradition for fossil fuel extraction and export. And we have a high income country where our citizens have a very high spending power. So the Norwegian government is very ambitious these days. And they have really stated that they want Norway to be a frontrunner within the circular economy space. But unfortunately, on a national level, we lack policies, we lack goals, and we lack investments towards the transition to a circular economy. And the Norwegian government is working these days to write the circular economy strategy for Norway. And therefore, the big question is, will we address the difficult questions, the painful questions, where we are prioritizing strategies that reduce the material footprint? Or will we just end up with end-of-pipe solutions? So, as indicated by Matthew, closing the circularity gap serves a higher objective, and it's also about reducing CO2 emissions. And Norway has a long-term goal of becoming one of these low-carbon societies. And the governments are taking steps towards climate change, but we have still a way to go. So our climate change measures are really focusing on energy efficiency and technologies to lower carbon, to a low carbon society. And there is little focus on bridging the low carbon agenda and the circular economy agenda, and bring them together. And therefore, we really need this systems perspective. We need to develop our mental models so we can see the circular economy as a mean to an end. And in our way of developing this mental model for the Norwegian economy, the circularity gap really provide the right data and the insight. And we have developed the scenarios that is sketching pathway for Norway, the Norwegian economy, to become more circular. And in this report, we are also exploring employment's effect on consumer behavior. And when we are waiting for the national government, the next slide, please, we really see that it is the business and the local governments that are taking the lead. So when we was working with a gap report for Norway, it was really the Norwegian businesses that was funding this report, and they are promoting it and carry on with the message. But we also see that the local government is taking leadership. And this week I was very happy to join a workshop in Kongsvinger where concrete initiative on circular pilots was initiated. And this representing really the collaboration between the local government and businesses. So all in all, the Circularity Gap report for Norway really has created the foundation and the insight to build back the Norwegian economy better. So, right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexander, for giving a deep dive in Norway. I'm really surprised that a country which leads in so many international indicators is so low on circularity. So we go now on to the next speaker, but I hope during the Q&A you will come back to us and explain how that's possible. Let's move to Quebec, to Etienne Anger. He's Business Development Manager at Recycle Quebec. Please, the floor is yours, Etienne.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the opportunity to talk about our project today. So with the first slide, just to told you, Recyc Quebec, we are a governmental agency in the province of Quebec. We are in the eastern part of Canada, and our mission is really to lead Quebec to reduce, reuse, recycle, and recover residual materials to promote a circular economy and fight climate change. So the circular economy part of our mission was added about 5 years ago because we really thought it would give us a broader and more complete vision on all the steps of the life cycle of resources to better manage it at every step and have that global vision. So basically today, I just want to show you how we went from 0 to CGR in about 5 years. So next slide, please. So 0 to CGR, maybe it's a little bit exaggerated because we had lots of things going on at the beginning. So here you have our circular economy diagram for Quebec, developed with all the stakeholders. So about 5 years ago, there was one main stakeholder group called the Pole, with various stakeholders from government, businesses, NGOs, and research centers that really gathered to see what is circular economy, what are the opportunities for Quebec, how we can communicate on this, create a diagram like this one, and how to make it happen. So that really kind of kickstarted the first step for circular economy in Quebec. Then we put in place at Recyc Quebec a governmental group to really share, learn, and try to coordinate all the projects inside the government to speak with one voice and to be sure we pull the rope all at the same time. Then after 2 years, we saw that there was a big interest on circular economy. We were asked for tools, for elements, for example of projects. So we did a big event in 2018, the Assises of the Circular Economy in Quebec. Sold out event, more than 400 people came to talk about circular economy, see the best example from here and abroad, and discuss with the reality of Quebec, what can we push it forward. So then after this event, it really like sparked things up for circular economy. We had to put on a website on place with a hub with all the tools, example of project, interactive map to really have one-stop shop for circular economy in Quebec for all the stakeholders. We then started to find just the word circular economy. We're trying to find it in different action plan, documents, strategies from the public sector and from the business sector as well. And then more recently, more and more projects associated with circular economy, grassroots project pop up everywhere in Quebec, like a regional circular economy roadmap. And we have numerous industrial ecology all over the map in Quebec that are very, very active. And we have performance economy pilot project, study between social and circular economy to see the link. So at one point we said, okay, there's a lot of things going on. And I think we just need a tool to have a snapshot of the situation, gather some data, and to see where we have to put our effort and try to coordinate action to really have the most important impact. So then we saw the CGR world, very interesting metric, very interesting way of showing things that we talk to people. Then afterward, there was the national level one. And you know, Canada is a very, very big country, very different reality from coast to coast to coast, as we say. And then in Quebec, we don't have yet a law or a provincial roadmap for circular economy. So we thought that maybe we could try to do a CGR at the sub-national level, specifically for the province of Quebec, because with our reality, it would be something very interesting. So next slide, please. So after a little chat with Circular Economy, we decided to go on with the project for 3 main reasons. So first, really apply the existing global circularity matrix to Quebec economy to provide the first baseline to measure progress, very important. Secondly, to identify all the key levers for transitioning the circularity in Quebec, as well as the systemic barriers. And last but not least, really to have a tool to push further the discussion on circular economy in Quebec, talk about the challenges and the opportunities, and to see where we can put collectively our effort to really tilt the needle and have a more circular, resilient, and happy Quebec. So now we're about 3 months in the project. We're gathering data. We're having excellent insight from our advisory and scientific committee, and we're looking forward for the launch of our report in spring 2021. And even looking further to make this report live through the next years or so to really put things in action and really tilt the needle on our metrics. So that's it.
Great, Etienne. Thank you very much. I see some questions passing by. I think everybody is very curious. Where do you run into? What's your biggest obstacle? Can you give a very short reaction on that one?
Absolutely, easy one, data. We're the first one in America. We're the first one at the sub-national level. So, and we're in French here. So there's a language issue as well in the portrait, but we're digging everywhere to have the best data available to do the best report. So that would be the first challenge we're meeting right now.
Thanks for this reaction. Do not forget to send questions to Etienne because he will answer them all. So let's move to a new kid on the block, and that's the Australian Circular Economy Hub powered by Planet Arc. And welcome to Sean O'Malley, Head of Research. Well, we can't thank you enough for being here with us because I wonder if the audience knows at what time it is in your place. But anyhow, the floor is yours, Sean. Please.
Good morning, Frank. It's 1:30 a.m. here. We are at the very early stages of our journey in working a circularity gap report. I thought I'd give you a bit of a background to where we are, what the status is in Australia. Next slide, please. So Planet Arc, we're a not-for-profit. We've been around for 24 years. We're about creating simple behavior changes that can drive benefits for the environment. I've been with them for half that time, and the ACE Hub has been around in some form for about 18 months now, and we actually officially launch in a couple of weeks on 24th of November. But you know, we've got 4 pillars that we've developed. Basically, we need to get out there. We need to collaborate. We need to inspire the community, drive awareness of the circular economy, particularly in business and government. Get some understanding. We need to educate. We need to collaborate. We need to get that information shared. We need to enable action. So we've got one big project, it's setting up a marketplace for materials, for used materials, to find out users who want those materials. And my role is metrics within that. And we're all about supporting and changing policy and regulations that can drive the circular economy. Current state of the circular economy knowledge within Australia is highly variable. We have a lot of expert users who really know what it's about, but when we're asked, and you know, to people out there in the world, it's really about recycling at the moment. A lot of people just think it's about recycling and recovering those materials, and we know there's more than that. 2 events have really created change within Australia at the moment. The China National Sword, where our waste could no longer go overseas, has created a massive drive to get recycling and use of those materials going within the country. And more recently, the need to be independent from supplies from other countries come to the fore. And we're seeing the drive into manufacturing for using those materials. Next slide, please. My role has been to set up metrics. And for me, this has been a bit of a journey. September last year, I was in the Netherlands chatting to Jelmer from Shifting Paradigms and Jordi from Circular Economy. I learned a lot, but there's still a lot more to learn. We've set 4 initial objectives: evaluate the tools and the expertise that's out there globally and nationally, encourage the development and improvement of metrics within Australia to determine circularity, and create our own circularity gap report and feed that into the global circularity gap report. Oh, can we go back one slide? Oh, sorry. Yep, leave it on that one. Thank you. There are challenges. We know there are challenges. We're already encountering them. Australia is a very, very large country. The tyranny of distance has its impacts. We have federal and state governments. So at the federal level, they set the major laws, and then the states get to work out how they implement those laws, which can lead to different pathways in terms of collecting data, even the terminology can vary. My mission's been very much to try and understand what the state of play is and what we need to do to drive metrics. Next slide, please. The good news is we've got experts. I'm working with Dr. Heinz Schandl, who is a material flow expert. He works with CSIRO, our national science agency. Our initial focus has been to establish a working group, a metrics working group, and we're looking at recruiting people from 3 major pillars. Science and experts, so looking at things like material flow analysis, LCA, greenhouse gas, input-output, and other fields, economics, peak industry bodies, the manufacturers, the packaging industry, the farming industry, the food industry, and also government at various levels, national, state, and even local. And we're bringing together the community of practice to understand what they need, what information is available, and how we can harmonize that. Really, when you ask these people what they want, they don't know yet. And when do they want it? They want it last week. So we've got our work cut out for us. We're early on in our journey, but great opportunity to learn from what's happening elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Considering the time, let's quickly move on to a Q&A with all the different speakers. There's a lively chat going on and already being answered, so do follow that. But let's take some of the main questions to this main stage. First, Matthew. The various dimensions of the circularity gap report. I know that circular economy is working at the city level. We see from Quebec that you can measure at a state or province level. We have the national level and international level. Can you reflect on when you go for which level and what's the main difference of each of them? A short answer, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, currently, strictly speaking, the circularity gap can be reported and measured at a global level, of course, because that's actually the easiest. It's just one system, Earth. National level works quite well because that's how kind of statistics are organized. It so happens that within Canada, it's possible to do that at the province of Quebec, but often that's actually quite where you get into a bit of a blurry line and the data sort of runs a bit dry. At the city level, we take a different approach, but we still focus on doing a material flow analysis, really actually mostly utilizing bottom-up data, so really city level data.
Thanks for that, Matthew. Yeah, we are still surprised about why Norway scores so low on the circularity gap indicator. Alexander, can you dwell on that? Can you explain it from the economics of Norway, why that's the case?
Yeah, it was a lot of expectation when we released the Norwegian report, and it was more than 1,200 people that was following us. And when we come with the figure 2.4, it was a bit of a shock for a lot of people because everyone is expecting Norway to perform very well. But as we know, Norway is a small open economy. And as the X-ray of the Norwegian economy that Matthew showed us, we are a heavy import and export nation. So we import a lot of materials. So our material footprint actually originates largely outside Norway. And secondly, we have a very high living standard in Norway, and that really creates a high material footprint. But we are not creating so much waste. So it's very little that is cycled back into the economy again. Instead, we are building up a large amount of stock, houses, infrastructure, cars, boats. So with this high import, with the high level of living, the high stock creation we create, that really creates this very low number, 2.4%.
Okay, and what would be your prime action? If you have one recommendation for Norway, what should they pick up?
No, we need to, as I mentioned earlier, we need to try to really address the painful questions here. Because for Norway, we are oil and gas nation, it's very easy to focus on end of pipe solution. We talked about CCS, we talked about all other things that Norway would like to do, but really trying to understand why do we have this enormous and massive material footprint. And then we need to looking at the measure that really can lower the material footprint of the country. And I really hope that the Norwegian government take this seriously when they are starting developing the strategy for Norway.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. There have been lots of questions about data and the metrics. Well, without becoming too fetishist or nerdy and risk losing half of the audience here, how do we get the right data and how do we get the data right? Maybe that's a nice moment to introduce Casper, who is the web chat moderator as well. Casper, can you please answer this question? We have different countries, regions, different economies. How do you choose your data? Which flows? How do you deal with import, export, with mining countries? Can you give us just lift the lid a little bit of this complex discussion?
Sure. I will try without making it too technical. So certainly, I think what's come into what we've seen in the discussion is that data is crucial. And yeah, the key to these projects is to build a solid fact base and database to make decisions on. And of course, what's key is to find data that as accurately as possible reflects the local material and energy flows. And as Matthew was sharing already, that once you look at a national level, the element of trade comes in, that is quite important. So the type of data that we usually use is a supply use and input-output tables. And those are to some extent available really on a global level or in databases maintained at a global level, with specific countries having data available also on a national level. But also, as I think some questions already came in, especially also in more developing regions, that data is very limited and also therefore limits our abilities to calculate these metrics, at least to a high level of accuracy. And therefore, what's really important with every one of these reports that we do is that we build a strong coalition of local partners. And I think Alexander and Etienne, you can testify to that, because it's so crucial to be working with local academic partners. And I see Doris, you're also on the call from our work with on the Circularity Gap Report Austria, who was actually a partner from in a university in Vienna. And so building those coalitions of scientists that already do similar research and maintain databases themselves or involved in the maintenance of these, and also working with local statistics offices is quite crucial to that. And I think this is where I'm going to keep it before I start rambling on more about technicalities. But yeah, happy to also answer more questions.
Consider this
later.
Thank you very much. Maybe a question to both Sean and Etienne is, let's say, what's the number one hurdle for Sean to start this work? We'll start with Sean. And also the number one hurdle to bring this further once the report has finalized. How can we go to the actionable level, at governmental level, business level? Sean, some reflections from you.
Number one hurdle. I think it's just creating a community of practice. We're a very large country, as I said. We've got to bring the community together. We've identified that. I think the data's there, but it's singing off the same hymn sheet for everybody, and then finding out what we don't know. What we don't know. We're very early on in our journey. I think there's a lot of information there. We've just got to access it.
Are the businesses involved in Australia? Is there interest from business side?
Oh yes, absolutely. The likes of Brambles have already done, measured their circularity. We know there's a lot of interest there, employing circularity managers. There's a definite change happening. The switch to recycled content as one measure of activity. So there's definitely a lot happening within business. It's great. So
business is probably one of the main drivers.
Absolutely. It's definitely there's groups out there wanting change.
Etienne, can you look a little bit forward? We don't know what your number will be, but how can we make this actionable once the number comes out? Are you preparing for that already?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're eager to see the report in spring, but we're looking maybe for our second edition, our big event on circular economy, maybe to try to work on certain topics that the report will show us that there's opportunity to go forward. And the thing is, in Quebec, there's a lot of interest on circular economy, lots of projects going on all the various strategy that I show you on the little diagram. So the challenge here is really to gather everybody around one main thread, to gather all the action and be sure we're, as we say, pulling the rope at the same time. So that will be the challenge with I would say, after the report, to really bring everybody together, have the same vision, and then maybe dig deeper on maybe mobility, construction, agro-food industry, where maybe there's more opportunities to tilt the needle. So to really gather every important stakeholder and go forward and link all the programs, all the financial aids or the tools that we develop to pinpoint those elements.
Alexander, is the outcome of the report, do you find it actionable enough for follow-up, zooming in on specific sectors?
Yes, indeed. It has created a lot of attention from the building and construction industry, and also from businesses. So we have been having these regular conversation with different industries. So that has been really useful. But it's also, yeah.
Okay, let's, considering the time, Casper, you've been studying the web chat. Can you pick out some of the most interesting questions for this webinar and address them to one of the persons? A favorite you have?
Well, I think there's quite a few ones that are quite interesting. I did think that one question that I think Sophia and Victor were asking about, really what happens after these reports, and to what extent are there also check-in goals included, and to see also if the percentage is shifting, how can we follow up on this? And also how can we follow up with it on policy, and maybe giving a bit of an some ideas on how the discussion is currently carried into the policy, and maybe also into a monitoring framework. Alexander, maybe you could share a bit more on that.
Yeah, so since the Norwegian government is developing their strategy at the moment, one of the main recommendations coming from big organizations like Deloitte and others is that we need to have some metrics. We need to follow the progress. How are we performing today, and how are we performing the years to come? So putting together metrics is a key, and therefore we really hope that we will follow up this work, because it has been such a huge learning process for a lot of stakeholders involved here, and then following up with metrics so we can create a new gap report in a few years' time will be extremely exciting.
Thank you, Alexander. There is a question from Ekaterina, and considering the time, I think it's quite appropriate. And this is a question to all. It's basically, what do you recommend for a country that wants to start measuring? What's your best advice for them? Let's start with Matthew to answer these questions.
Well, without being too direct, I think we're always welcome to an introductory and exploratory phone call to see where that would go. And I think that's, that's obviously precisely what we do, what we try to do. But I think also hearing what the other panelists have spoken about, it actually really is a lot of sort of legwork on the ground there about getting together the right stakeholders. Also in terms of the sort of academic or scientific community to really pull together the right data and the right information, but also making sure that sort of after the big push has been made, that it can also have legs after the project, and the messaging of the gap report can sort of find a useful channel for action after the report is done.
Etienne, let's look to your reality from Quebec. What would be your advice? You're still in the middle of it.
Yeah, first one, for sure, data. Just dig a little bit beforehand, see what you got, where are the gap in data that you have to fill, so to really have a sense of where you're going and for the timeline. And second, but not least, stakeholders. Really have your champion, your ambassador of circular economy on board. So they will help you through the project to spread the word, and after to really help you with to make to give leg to the report, as Matthew said. It's a good expression, to really make it alive and spread the news and have them as example that they're making it real and there are real impact, and that that metric is going to be useful after to follow the how you're going to do in the next year. So data stakeholders.
Thank you, Etienne. Get your champions on board. How's that with Norway? Alexander.
Yeah, it's very important to get the right stakeholders. And the very first question we also had was about the data. Do we have that data? So we established a scientific committee with the research organization SINTEF and the Norwegian University for Science and Technology. And they provided really good insight. And at the end, we really feel confidence when it comes to the data we have been using in the report. And I think working with the data, working with these different actors was really exciting. You learn a lot, and it was really exciting to working together with circular economy in that part of the project.
You mentioned that, let's say, most momentum, let's say, was not from the national government, more with other actors. Is it important to have the national government aligned?
Indeed, I think it will make it very much easier if you involve the national government. But in Norway, the national government, when we started the project, was running two processes in parallel. So they have been very interested in the work we have been doing, but they have not been an active player. But having them also as an active player into the project, providing knowledge and take ownership, will make it very strong, I believe.
I imagine. Well, that's the time to move over to Sean. Based on this free advice, Sean, what are your immediate next steps, and when do you think that we can see the light of the first Australian Circularity Gap report? Unmute, please.
Sorry. Immediate next steps to really get that working group going, to give us direction, steer us in the right area. We've talked about the experts. They're the experts. You know, I've done a lot of reading, but it'll take me a few years to even catch up the basics of some of this stuff. So I'll be getting those experts together, building the information. In terms of the timing on the report, I quite like the Quebec timeline, 5 years, but I think time is against us. I would like to think 18 months would be something that we can start thinking about. I've seen some of the data. There's some elements there already, but it really depends on how we can connect the states with the national numbers and see what elements we can combine.
Thank you for that, Sean. And you know, if you look around on the screen, you have friends around who can help you with that. So let's start the community.
Yeah.
So considering the time of our webinar, let me now turn to the CEO of Circular Economy, Martin Lopez Cardozo. Martin, compliments for what Circular Economy has started a few years ago. As you can see today, there is momentum. You started something. Well, based on lessons learned from the past, can you share with us
We're not hearing you at the moment, Freek. You were lost for a few moments.
Well, let me, I think I got the question. So I think the question of Freek was, you know, we're creating a lot of momentum. How do we see this moving forward? And I was just reflecting on that. I mean, isn't this great? Like, I think Giselle asked at the beginning of the webinar is, wow, this is a real big systemic change. You know, how do you make that happen? And it was exactly the same question we asked ourselves a couple of years ago when this initiative started. And, you know, we were working quite a bit with cities and with businesses. And when we launched the Circular Gap Report for the world, you know, there was, I think, one of the first times when, you know, we addressed the state of circularity on a very high level with a very clear metric. And I think we set something in motion, and not only the, you know, a follow-up reports on the international level, on the world level, but then, you know, Austria, Netherlands, Norway, Quebec, you know, hopefully Australia, So it's really snowballing. And what we're finding is, because you have that report on the highest level, you have this very simple metric that people recognize. Of course, there's a lot of more complicated things behind it, but that's sort of what politicians and what consumers can speak to. And now we see that a lot of countries who want to start their national agenda either started from the government, but like in Norway, it could also start from NGOs or businesses or people who want to put circularity on the map. This is exactly a great way to start, because it sort of maps it, it compares it with other countries, and then it very naturally goes into, okay, what should our agenda then be for the next couple years, and how do we make that happen? And under that umbrella, you can then organize all kinds of other changes. So I guess my call to action to everybody is, and I think we have a lot of nationalities here on the webinar, is I think all countries should try to start planning for a national circularity gap report if you haven't done so. And I think that will create a big movement that will move a lot of people forward on the national level, while we're also doing more of the bottom-up work with businesses and cities on a much more local level. So, great to have so much of our partners here. We're extremely excited, and as Matthew mentioned, feel free to give us a call, and we're happy to help out as much as we can. Back to Freek.
Thank you, Martijn. Just asking, isn't there something big going to happen in January at the World Economic Forum? Can you give us a sneak preview?
Yeah, that's right. So on January 26, that's the current date, we're launching the next report. This is a picture I think you just showed from our last report, where we really not included only the sort of the material and the harder circularity metrics, but also some of the societal metrics, and created this notion of ecological sound and also just space. And our big takeaway there was that actually all nations, if you frame it that way, are developing nations, and we all have to work and contribute. And there's not like good nations or bad nations. We all have to, move towards being in that center, in that safe space. And the next, I think Matthew mentioned, the next theme is going to be around circularity as it relates to climate. And very excited to welcome everybody, and stay posted for the messages around the invitation.
Thank you very much, Martijn. So the next round is circular economy and the climate gap. And then I have a dream. It would be wonderful to have the Circularity Gap Report touching on biodiversity, and the Circularity Gap Report touching on social equality. So we have dreams for the future. Many thanks for your inspiring vision. And this is also a good moment to round up this webinar. We do hope you were inspired. So on behalf of Circular Economy and Holland Circular Hotspot, I say thanks to the audience for being with us. As aftercare, we will send you all the presentations, we will send you the recording and all the open questions in the web chat. If you like our work, do follow us on our newsletters. Inscribe yourself. Many thanks to the speakers, Ladea, Matthew, Alexander, Etienne, Sean, Casper. We love the work with what you did. Also, many thanks for the people, let's say, invisible behind the screens. Melanie, Diana, you were great help. Thanks a lot. Have a safe day, everybody. Thank you. See you soon.